from our studios in Kingstown, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. It's your favorite Thursday night show, Up Late with Sehon Marshall. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome the host of tonight's show, Sehon Marshall.
Good evening, and welcome to your favorite Thursday evening or Thursday night show, Up Late with Sehon Marshall. I'm your host, Sehon Marshall, and I'll be here with you for at least another hour or so. Now, let me thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, I am going to give you a few seconds to share the live on your pages, whether it's WhatsApp or Facebook or where have you, while I do the same as well. Now that usually takes a few seconds, well, maybe a minute and a half or so. So I'm going to give you that time. So I'm going to do it, and I'm going to ask you to share the live as well. So I'm going to YouTube, like I always do. I'm going to look for my channel, which is what you would do as well. Many of you should have gotten the alert because you've subscribed. If you haven't subscribed, it means you're not getting the alert. So you need to change that. All right. So for those of you who have subscribed, you've gotten the alert, and now I'm going to ask you to share the podcast, right? So here I am. I'm going to do exactly what I'm asking you to do, and I'm going to share. I'm going to share to Facebook. Shoot. Yeah, I have a problem with my Facebook. Sorry. Let's try it again. Share. More. I think I'm going to have to copy it though. Right? I'm going to have to copy it, but that's fine. I'm sharing to Facebook. I'm sharing to Instagram, everywhere. So I'm asking you to do exactly the same as well. So let me copy this link, and I'm going to share it. I'm sharing it here on Up Late with Sehon Marshall. Now, over the last couple of days, I've been experiencing problem with my own Facebook page because, like I did mention to you, I have been out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and my family took me on vacation. So while I was in the UK, many of you saw that I was called to the bar last week. While I was in the UK, where are we now? Dundu, all right, right. Let's make sure that that's up there. Yes, it is. All right. So we did go to different countries in Northern Europe, and I think because I was signing in from a different IP address, Facebook flagged me, and as a result, I'm not able to sign in properly to my Facebook page. Thankfully, I cross post. So what that allows me to do is when I post on Instagram, like Present Please, for example, it goes directly to my Facebook page. So I don't have to actually log into Facebook because I have it set up that way. So you're still able to see Present Please on all of the pages, but logging into Facebook directly, I've not been able to do, unfortunately. All right, so I'm going to post all of these where I normally do, and hopefully my followers are able to access this evening's program. All right, so one more sharing I have to do. I think I might have had it already. No, okay, one more, and I should be up and running with this afternoon's program. All right, I think I have it covered everywhere. All right, so it's Thursday evening, and I'm here. And I want to thank all of you who have tuned in, and I want to welcome all of you to this afternoon's program. As always, I must thank and show my appreciation to every single individual who has subscribed to this channel. The last time I checked, we had 1,493 subscribers. Let's try and push it up to 1,500 by the end of the week, and hopefully, very soon, we can expand it to 2,000. But 1,400 of you have subscribed, and others have activated membership. Now, on the issue of the membership, I must tell you that within recent days, I've gotten I've been contacted from YouTube, and I'm having difficulty with the verification the identity verification situation. And I think they've paused the membership. So some of you may have gotten emails to say that it has been paused. I'm trying to resolve that. I don't know what that came from because I've been on YouTube for quite a while. I've been paying for ads from YouTube. I've spent hundreds of dollars paying for ads, and all of a sudden they're having a problem with verification. But we'll see where that goes. So I'm trying to resolve that so that those of you with your membership, you can continue to contribute in that way. If you have contributed through the membership program, what some individuals have done, and I can encourage you to do that as well. At the bottom of the program, you can see that little banner going across with information. Where if you're in the US or if you're in North America, for example, you can use Zelle and you can say, listen, it's $3 a month. I can donate 1 year's subscription of $36 or what have you, and send it directly and forget about that. If you want to contribute more, you can do that. But I must tell you that your contributions, your donations have been so integral in keeping this program on the air, bringing this content out. And I know many of you look forward to this content. So let me thank all those of you who have subscribed and those of you who have activated membership, those who have contributed financially to the program. I want to show the appreciation and thank you so much for your contribution to making sure that this program stays on the air. It is important for this program to stay on the air. Now, let me make sure we get the comments up so that those of you who are commenting can see who you are. Epsi, I see you and I know where you are. Excuse me, Val, I see you as well. I know where you are. You're in Brooklyn. So again, please, as you log on, you can simply say where you're logging on from, and so I can recognize you. But thank you so much, those of you. Again, I can't recognize you and acknowledge you if you don't message. So those of you who are here, please message. Now we have a pretty good program on tonight. I'm going to be talking about our democracy, the way that our democracy may be under threat. Now, those of you who are living in the US may have heard this often based on what is happening in the United States. And already I am seeing very early signs in St. Vincent and the Grenadines where something similar may be happening. And we're going to be discussing that tonight. But I wanted to touch on two things before I get into the crux of the matter. One of the first things I wanted to get into is a video I saw of a good friend of mine, and I got to know him when I served as press secretary at the office of the Prime Minister because he was the outrider. He was one of the outriders to the Prime Minister, to the convoy of the Prime Minister. He's a ordinary young man from ordinary working class family from Barley, Bottle Glass to be exact. Young man called Chet Solomon, named Chet Solomon, a sergeant of police. And there's a video circulating around where Chet is being interviewed by someone and he's asked about, how he would describe St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And he said he would describe St. Vincent and the Grenadines as a little America. He said, we're not there yet. A mini America, he said, mini America. He said, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And I tell you sometimes, Vincentians disappoint me. We can be at our low point some of the most unpatriotic people I know. Because I'm not sure if it is a shortage of cognitive ability where people actually thought he was. I saw individuals posting things with skyscrapers and so forth. I mean, is that your understanding of America, skyscrapers? Maybe you have not been to America, because every place in America do have skyscrapers. There are areas in the US, cities in the US, where you have very tall buildings in Manhattan and downtown Brooklyn and so on. But if you drive through other areas of the United States of America, every skyscrapers not there everywhere. And so it shows the absence of knowledge of the reality of the US when the only understanding of a mini America or America is skyscrapers. And not the fact that, you remember during the campaign, one of the things that the ULP campaign on in November, which I thought missed a lot of individuals was that we were on our way to first world status. And that's what America is considered to be, a first world country. Canada, the US, the EU, the G20 countries and so on, first world countries. And first world status isn't about skyscrapers. It's about opportunity. It's about access. And the truth is, Chet Solomon actually did us a disservice because in many ways we are advanced. We are way advanced where America is concerned. For example, we have access to free healthcare or heavily subsidized healthcare. Now, what is the point in having the most advanced health service in the world when they can't access it if you don't have insurance? That's America for you. But in St. Vincent, as limited as our health services are, or our health service is, we have complete access to it. And no one is turned away because we do not have insurance. Education. Do you know how much it costs to educate your children in America? Sure. From kindergarten to elementary and high school, it's free. But do you know what it costs to go to a community college or university? Something that our government supports our students in significant ways. In terms of education, we are more advanced in terms of the access to education than many Americans are. Housing, for example, the way the previous administration provided low, no, middle income homes to individuals. In that instance, in that specific situation, we are more advanced than the US because we know how difficult it is. As a matter of fact, in New York, the new mayor is trying to make housing affordable because people making good money can't afford housing in America. We made housing affordable in St. Vincent and Grenadines through different policies of the government. So I felt sorry for many of the individuals who were reposting that video mocking Sergeant Solomon because they clearly did not or do not understand the idea of bringing St. Vincent and the Grenadines to a first world country status where there is access to many of the opportunities that aren't available in what we call third world countries. When I saw it, I smiled and I thought, good for you, Chet. Talk about St. Vincent and the Grenadines in the way we really should be. Many of you in our country, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, have gotten education up to master's level at no cost to you, something that people in America can't get. And you're mocking the fact that, as a matter of fact, America should be trying to be a mini St. Vincent so that its citizens can be educated up to university level at very little cost to them. That's what in America. So in some instances, as I said, Chet Solomon did our country an injustice because America needs to pattern us in areas of education, access to housing, and access to healthcare. There are other areas that we can now try to upgrade our system and make them our health system, for example, with more modern equipment and improve the technology. But the absence of technology, or rather, the presence of the technology in America, but the citizens not having access to that healthcare because of an absence of insurance or lack of insurance makes no sense. So I just have to comment on that. The second thing I want to comment on, Toronto, I see you. Good night, good night. And Toronto is saying, speaking about what is happening in Toronto as well. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is the issue regarding the non-invitation of the leader of the opposition, former Prime Minister, and brainchild behind the Zero Hunger Trust Fund, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, to the 10th anniversary celebration, and I'm using the word celebration broadly, of the Zero Hunger Trust Fund. Now, the trust fund was established by Labour, under Labour, the brainchild of the previous ULP administration. The idea is that we want to zero hunger, that nobody is in anywhere and he should go hungry. And so this particular initiative was established. It was one that, or it is one that the former administration was proud of, dear to their heart, because they saw the need to address the issue of hunger among the most vulnerable in our society. Now, say what you want. When you look back at the ULP's tenure in office, a lot of its policies were geared at addressing the issues of the poor and the working class to lift them out of poverty. As a matter of fact, I remember having a discussion with a good friend of mine. He is a good comrade. And he said that there was, in his mind, he said there was such an overemphasis on the poor and the working class and not enough on the middle class. And that's his opinion. But there was so much emphasis on areas of things like education. We know the song from Sparrow that, and the adage that says, education is the best way to lift you out of poverty. We know of all of that. And so the government focused on educating the population. Someone sent me an article recently, and I haven't quite read it yet in the way I want to. I've gone through it, where education is seen as a part of infrastructure development. You have to invest in education. And the government did that. Yes? And so the education revolution assisted in lifting many families out of poverty into a middle class, where now you have professionals in these families that were once, in not earning significant income. Now, multiple individuals in those families are earning professional incomes that has enabled them to uh, reconstruct homes, buy new homes, buy car, invest in different things and so forth, lifting them out of poverty, bringing them into a middle class. And the Zero Hunger Trust Fund was one such policy. I've known that, among other things, and I can't speak to all of the things that the Zero Hunger Trust Fund has done, but the Zero Hunger Trust Fund has assisted schools in their school feeding program, donated food stuff for them, students who don't have the supplies for school, bags and so forth. The Zero Hunger Trust Fund has given students supplies to go to school, hundreds of them. So you see the impact of this trust fund in addressing the needs of the most vulnerable. Now, I said to you that the trust fund was there, near and there to the heart of the government, but even more so, the former prime minister. He believed in this initiative, and he supported this initiative not just legislatively, where he made sure that the trust fund was on a strong legal footing, not just from a policy standpoint, but also personally. Yes, the prime minister, the then prime minister, current leader of the opposition, Comrade Ralph, made sure that he donated 1 month's salary every year to the Zero Hunger Trust Fund. Every year. Now, the ZHTF has been in existence for 10 years. We know that the salary of the prime minister of the country is about $13,000 a month, just about, maybe a little bit over that. Now, let me talk about tax and so on. It might still, with tax and NIS and so forth, it might be about $10,000. If you multiply one salary every year, 1 month salary every year for 10 years, at best, if you look at the gross, we're looking at over $130 something thousand. If you look at the after-tax amount, it's still about $100,000. So of his personal income, his personal money out of pocket, not government money, not donor money, his personal money, Dr. Gonzalez has donated in excess of $100,000 to the Zero Hunger Trust Fund. I have heard him many times on Parliament, at press conferences and so forth. encourage the leader of the opposition. Why don't you match me? Do that too. You make about $7,000-8,000 a month. Donate 1 month's salary. He's also a lawyer, making good money in his legal practice as well. Donate something. He never did. And I can say he never did because knowing the NDP, had he done so, he would have promoted that. The fact that he didn't promote it, in my view, he never did. So you have Dr. Gonzalez, Prime Minister, donating his personal finances to the Zero Hunger Trust Fund. And then you have the leader of the opposition at the time refusing so to do. Refusing to. Remember, he used to say, put the money where the pain is? Well, you have an opportunity to do so with the Zero Hunger Trust Fund. Not a cent, not a dime, but you want to pretend that you love people. So you have that level of contribution, and you can see how much that policy, that initiative meant to the government and to the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister, personally. On the 1st of April, the Zero Hunger Trust Fund celebrated 10 years. And I'm listening to Dr. Gonzalez speaking on his program, Morning Comrade, on Wednesday. And he's making the point that he was not invited to that event. And listen to me, I was disappointed. To me, it's disgraceful. It's distasteful. It's shameful that the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, led by Godwin Friday, who never cared about donating personally to the Zero Hunger Trust Fund. I'm not even sure if he supported it in Parliament. His government could be so petty, so partisan political in their pettiness that they couldn't consider to invite Dr. Gonzalez to that event. Now, I know the trust fund has some excellent professionals. I know the head of the trust fund, I'm not sure if the title is CEO or director or what have you, Sehon Marshall, I believe is her name. Professional was worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think trade, was at the ACS in Trinidad and so forth. Excellent professional. I know her to be someone who is steadfast in her work in her work and in her role. And so I will never accuse Shafia of being partisan and that petty. Never. So Shafia, I'm giving you a pass. I am giving your the individuals under your supervision a pass. But I know, having been there, and I've seen things organized, whether it's through Invest SVG, when I work there or what have you, when you're planning, the first thing you do when you're looking at the invitation list, you look at Parliament. Because remember, Parliament is the legislative branch of the government. And they will be the ones invited because the Prime Minister is the head of the government side on Parliament, and then you have the opposition leader on the other side. So you're inviting people, you go to the list of Parliament. The opposition leader name must be Israel Gonzalez. He's not someone who's new to the polity of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. He's always said that, and the record would show, that he has participated in every election since 1979. But more than that, he has been Prime Minister since 2001 to 2005. 25, sorry. So we're looking at almost 25 years as Prime Minister. That's a name you go miss. And then when you look at his contribution to the fund itself, how do you explain an oversight in inviting such an individual? How? I want you guys at home to think about it. And you guys can determine whether or not it was an oversight or whether this new government of our country, while they ain't had time to do many things, they can't find the time to respond and give comments on things that matter. they can find the time to be vindictive, they can find the time to victimize, and they can find the time to be petty. They can't find the time to address the conflicts that are going on. No time to address the conflict with Venezuela. Yes? No time to speak to the country about deportees. No time to speak to the country about what we can expect from the conflict going on in the Middle East between Israel, US, and Iran. No, no, no. But they could find time to make call and ensure that Ralph Gonsalves is not invited to a simple issue, a commemoration, 10 years of a zero hunger trust fund that his government started and that he contributed to significantly. They could find time to have these retribution rallies across the country, to have their supporters vent about getting rid of Labour supporters. But they can't find time to address in a meaningful way the things that are affecting Vincentians. They can't find time to meet with the teachers union to address the issues of teachers. But they could find the time to make sure that Ralph Gonsalves is not invited to an event to celebrate, commemorate 10 years of the Zero Hunger Trust Fund. What a government! I mean, under the ULP, we said that in an admirational type of way. What a government! A government that can do this, that, multitask, make the impossible seem possible. What a government! No, we say it in a manner to express embarrassment. What a government! No, we say it in a manner to express disappointment. What a government! We say it in a manner to express our disapproval. What a government! Because many of the things that Vincentians who voted for them expected are not happening. And so now, already, you are hearing and you're seeing from Vincentians what they refer to as buyer's remorse. Already, Vincentians are ready to take it back to the store and ask for a refund. And maybe in this case, an exchange. Put back what we had because what we bought ain't working. That's the government we have now. And there are going to be people who would justify that. Hopefully, they don't come to justify by saying, oh, Labour used to do that, because we know that ain't true. Because I've been at events, hosting national events, where MPs from the NDP that was in opposition were present. I've been there. MPs in opposition were present. What I want to talk about, and I talk a little bit long about those things there, I want to talk about our democracy. I want to talk about how the ULP administration deepened our democracy through the legislative process and how that is under threat by this NDP administration. But to do so, I want to lay a historical foundation. And one of my good comrades and a comrade who contributes significantly to our program, when I had a program 2 weeks ago, I believe, called me and says, listen, I listened to that program and the history was on point. It was such a brilliant program. I was talking about education. And the comrade mentioned to me that particular comrade, I wouldn't give gender because I want nobody to figure out what I'm talking about. The comrade said, I was a product of that. I got my subjects at a particular school. I came overseas. I went and I got my degree. And I was the first person from that school to get a bachelor's degree. And the person is talking about how things are so improved now. So it's important for me to give a historical context. I think somebody's trying to, Lord have mercy. Lord, these people want to give a historical context as we move forward and move upward in addressing the issue of our democracy. Now, the NDP won the elections in 1984 under Mitchell, right? 1 second there. The NDP won the elections in 1984. Now, I don't know much about the first term, 84 to 89, because I was much younger then and I wasn't very much involved. But I remember the 1989 elections, and I remember they won all 15 seats. So for those spring chicken that are can 14-1, 14-1 and Labour dead, I try to remind them, listen, you had all the seats before, you know. and I'll break down what happened with the 15 nil. Right? Now, so the NDP, I remember the 1989 to 84 period. I remember when they won the elections in 89, I remember the mood in the country was somber. Like, wow, all 15 seats in opposition. The NDP during its time in office, and specifically during that 1989-94 period, did not have a very strong legislative agenda that was made public. Now, before 2001, the Parliament, the sitting of the House of Parliament was not broadcast publicly. That's the first thing I need to let you know. What you know today as the broadcast of Parliament was something that was done by the Unity Labour Party led by Ralph Gonsalves. It did not exist before that. So the NDP was in office, especially, and I'm talking about the 1989 to 1994 period. And because the practice of regular sittings of the Parliament held in a public fashion, that is at least on radio and on TV, because you had SVG TV at the time and you had NBC Radio, the parliaments didn't sit regularly. There wasn't a regular schedule of the sitting of Parliament, as we know it to be, at least once a month under Labour. And whenever it was held, there was no public broadcast of it. The only thing that I know, and many of you watching, including my comrade who contacted me regarding the education bit, was the budget presentation. The budget presentation was carried live on radio. I remember when the ULP came into office and they started broadcasting Parliament. Many individuals, including myself, would refer to the Parliament as budget because that was what we were accustomed to. The only time we heard what was going on in Parliament was during budget. No other time. So it was so strange to us that we would say budget happening. I mean, not budget, Parliament, because we'd always slip, because that's what we were accustomed to. Now, okay, Ken Backus, I'm not sure why you think that, but I'll get back to that just now. Ken Backus, there's an interesting comment, and I'll digress. Just give me a second. Let me address Ken Backus and this comment. Ken Backus says they call it a whale in Beckway, but I think doing this brings a cause. I'm not sure why Ken Backus thinks that way, but I want to say this, and please give me a few seconds because I want to come back to the specific issue of the democracy and the Parliament. But as I see this, and it's relevant, so I'm going to address it. I see this, so I'm going to address it. Ken Backus says they caught a whale in Beckway, but he thinks it brings a cause. Many individuals are against whaling in Beckway. They're against the blackfish hunting in Barley. But both communities, Beckway and Barley, are fishing communities, and that's part of the history and the culture of those communities. They do not engage in commercial whaling. they engage in subsistence whaling, where they go, they catch the blackfish, they catch the whale, they cut it up, and every part of the whale or blackfish is used, consumed. It's eaten, it's meat, they eat it. In the same way, they kill cows, in the same way they kill sheep, in the same way they kill fowl, in the same way they kill guana. It's used domestically for meal. And I noticed that Louise Mitchell, the country's attorney general, has always been anti-whaling in the Grenadines. Whatever organization that funded her, she is very much against it. And there is this effort at demonizing individuals in barley, bottle and glass, who hunt blackfish, and on Beckway, who engage in whaling, demonize them as barbaric, and so on and so forth. I remember what I was studying, and I was doing my LLM, my master's in climate change law and policy. And I was doing some research, and I came upon the situation of the indigenous people in Canada. The European Union, for example, banned seal meat, ban it. However, it is allowed to be imported from the indigenous people, the First Nation people in Canada, because it is accepted as part of the indigenous practice. It's accepted. So while they wouldn't buy seal meat and products from anywhere else, no seal meat and products, and you can research it if you think I'm lying, research it. Seal meat and seal products from anywhere else, banned in the EU. It's illegal. But if it's coming out of Canada, from the indigenous First Nation individuals who hunt that, it's okay because it is recognized, accepted, and respected as part of their indigenous culture. I thought, okay, they respect that and they allow it. Over the last week, I spent a week in Norway and in Finland. I go to Norway and I'm told that the hunting of polar bears is illegal, except for the indigenous people in Norway. They can hunt polar bears. It is accepted and respected as part of their history, their culture, their cultural practices. I go to Finland. I go on the shelves. You know what I find on the shelves? Whale meat, whale sausage. The hunting of whale meat and whales and so forth in Finland is accepted. It's accepted and respected as part of their culture, their heritage, their practices. So I asked myself, I turned to my sister who was with me, and I said, how is it that when certain people do it, it's respected and accepted as part of their culture, their heritage? But when black people in St. Vincent do it from bottle and glass and Beckway, it is barbaric and evil and wicked and must be outlawed. Why can't it be respected and accepted as part of our culture and our history in the same way? Why is it, Ken, a cause? Why is it a cause for people in Bottle and Glass to hunt blackfish and people in Beckway to hunt whale, but people in Norway can hunt whale? People in people in Finland can hunt whale. People in Norway can kill polar bears. People in Canada can kill seals. Why is it that there is no respect for our practices? Why? There's nothing worth respecting about people? There's nothing about heritage? We were ripped from Africa, where we lost everything. We start to cultivate new practices where you were brought, and you can't respect that. So that even our own and the daughter of someone who was prime minister for 16 years is fighting the indigenous people of our, well, not indigenous, but the people of our country with a practice that we've had for years. But I'm sure she wouldn't fight it with the individuals in Canada where she claims residence, where she claims citizenship, and fight them down for the seals that they're killing. I'm sure she wouldn't. And I'm sure she wouldn't go to Finland and fight them down for hunting a whale. But she has people and bottle and glass and whatever taking out pictures every time a whale is caught, a blackfish is caught, trying to, oh my God, malign those good people who are simply hunting for food. So I just had to say that. I just had to say that. But I move on. So I just had to say that on the side. We got respect with thing, you know. We got respect with thing. We not do no commercial whaling. We not kill thousands and hundreds of whales a year. We allowed 4 whales a year. 4. That's it. You know the blackfish man tell me? They say when blackfish are run, no fish in a day. Because they might kill the fish, they might run the fish. So you can't catch fish. But the Attorney General of St. Vincent probably has no understanding of that, or probably don't care. Because I guess she could get fish if she wants. But let me get back to what I was talking about. So I'm speaking about the democracy of our country through the legislative process. And I'm going back to 1989. It might seem I'm all over the place tonight, but I just had to respond to the comment by Ken Backus there. And I hope Ken Backus understands where I'm coming from. So we have the situation where 1994, when there was no opposition in the parliament, apparently there was hardly any parliament. But it was during that time that some of the most draconian acts in the country were passed. Now, many of you do not know this, but it was under the NDP during the period 1989 to 1994 that the age of consent was lowered from 16 years old to 15 years old. Let me repeat that. It was under the NDP administration, at the point when they had zero opposition in parliament because they had all 15 seats, that the age of consent, sexual consent for young girls, was lowered. It was age 16. They lowered it. The NDP administration, headed by James Mitchell, lowered the age of consent from 16 years old to 15 years old. So sometimes when I hear, suppose of the NDP going on and on about the age of consent and wait be, it was your party that lowered it. There was a bit of legislation referred to as the Wild Act, where a man could just walk up on the property if they figure things are going wild, nobody taking care of it, and just pick your fruits. Again, passed on the NDP. And it was also under the NDP that the well-known Otley Hall Marina during that 1994 period was negotiated. The deal was negotiated. Now that was the most remarkable thing because they were hardly having parliament. No one knows what's going on in parliament because it's not broadcast, it's not public. And during that time, I guess they hardly had to go to parliament because they could just do things in cabinet. Because here, what we don't need a parliament. Mind you, they had a speaker of the House of Assembly, they had a Governor General, they had MPs, members of parliament, but I guess there was no need for them to go into parliament. They could just make legislation in cabinet. So during that time, there was a resolution taken that required of all of the members of parliament of the NDP, the other 14, to allocate or forfeit their rights to debate, their rights to question, their rights to anything on the Otliol project, and vest all of their rights into one person. One person. You just hear the end bit about mismanagement, and you just hear the end bit about I man I and micromanagement. The most obvious clear sign of micromanagement and one manism in the country was that. So you had 14 men, all winning the seats, big man, from Alpian Allen in North Leeward to Hobie Young in Central Leeward, Jerry Scott in South Leeward, John Horn in West Kingstown, Parnell Campbell, who was the Attorney General in Central Kingstown. I believe it was Carlisle Dugan might be name, in East Kingstown, Yvonne Francis Gibson in West St. George, Louis Jones in East St. George, Burton Williams in South Windward, Bernard Wiley in Mariaqua, South Central Windward was Alan Cruikshank, Jonathan Peters was in North Central Windward, and I believe it was David Jack in North Windward. Mitchell, and at that time it might have been 89, Mary Hutchinson. I know it was Mary Hutchinson because I went to Mary's funeral. So I know 89 was Mary Hutchinson. So all of these individuals gave up their rights, and decided 1 2 1 2 1 2. Just double checking. Give me a thumbs up if you hear me again. Sorry about that. I lost power. Give me 1 second. Let me make sure my power is set up properly. Yes. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. All right. So I lost power. My apologies there. Um, yes. All right. So my apologies. There was a loss of power. Um, thank you so much for sticking around, those of you who did. So I was saying that there was a resolution taken that all of these individuals, 14 of them, gave over all of their power, their decision making role to one person. The only time, the biggest example of one manism in our country. And so James Mitchell took on the role of chief negotiator regarding Attlee Hall. He alone. Now, keep in mind that even though you had 14 other elected members of parliament who were there to represent the interests of Vincentians, there was no such representation. And only James Mitchell, the former prime minister, did all of the negotiations. Now, that led to one of the biggest corruption scandals ever in the history of the country. You don't say any bit about corruption. And you realize the frustration now by their own supporters because they're saying, hold on, you've been talking about corruption all the time. And up to now, you ain't bring a single shred of evidence of corruption. So where's the corruption? And I remember, um, I'm not sure if it is on the issue of corruption or what, but Bramble was making the point that it's just marketing. It was just marketing. We were marketing ourselves for the positions of government. Now, with the NDP, it was completely different. You had the Attlee Hall, one of the biggest corruption scandals in the country's history up to this day, where the government of our country was in debt for over $200 million, but the project that this debt facilitated was only worth $14 million. You ask yourself, where is the other $186 million? Where? And it might be coincidence. It might be coincidence that the Attlee Hall project and the NDP headquarters were built around the same time. It might be purely coincidence. But I just had to make that observation. So the biggest corruption scandal in the history of our country happened at a time when the NDP was in office and there was very little transparency, very little openness because there was no parliament. Parliament was not being held. All right? Excuse me. Now, in 1998, the NDP won the elections. They won 8 seats, Labour won 7. But interestingly, the party that had 7 seats had over 5,000 votes more than the NDP that had 8 seats. I think that it's important, because when in 2020 they won and they had about 500 votes more than the ULP with a 9-6 majority, they kept talking about popular vote and the government has no legitimacy. But the first time that happened was back in 1998, where the NDP had 8 seats, the ULP had 7 seats, but the ULP had 5,000 votes more. I think the ULP had 28,000 plus votes. The NDP had 23,000 plus votes. Right? But they were government. They won. The NDP appointed for that parliament Nolwyn McDowell, affectionately known as Nolly. Now, Nolly had just contested the elections against Ralph Gonsalves and had lost massively. But that was who the NDP elected as the Speaker of the House of Assembly. Excuse me. So Nolly was the new Speaker, and we had Parliament. At one sitting, Glenn Jackson, who at the time had been fired from 705, NDP was doing NDP was ambassador. He was doing his journalism. I can't believe it was if it was with WeFM or Hits FM. Can't remember which it was. But he decided that he would go into the Parliament and try and record some of it as a journalist for radio. Somebody alerted Nolly McDowell that Glenn was there recording the Parliament. This is Parliament. This is people's business. Nolly McDowell immediately interjected and informed Glenn to stop the recording and threatened him with arrest if he didn't stop. Now, you would ask yourself, what is the big deal if a journalist is recording the Parliament? What is secret in the Parliament? Is there a secret? Is there something that a journalist can record? That was Parliament under the NDP. It was undemocratic, in my view, because it wasn't open, it wasn't transparent. Vincentians didn't know what was happening. We knew of laws after they had been passed. We knew of laws after they had been passed. Now, remember this, eh? In 1989, the NDP won all 15 seats. By 1994, Labour Party MNU had come together in a unified ticket, and they had won 3 seats. Straker in Central Leeward, Ralph in North Central Windward, and Vince Beach in South Windward. You had individuals like Starkey John and so on who were very hardworking and did a lot of research and work to uncover a lot of the corruption that occurred under the NDP's tenure. The same Starkey John who's the Governor General now. And he was instrumental, and others like him, in unearthing the massive corruption that occurred under the NDP, especially regarding the Otley Hall project. And so, in a matter of, get this in? Imagine, in 1989, you win 15. In 94, you win 12. By 1998, 9 years after winning all 15 seats, you were losing the popular vote. That's why me worry about them with the 14-1. Because incompetence, mismanagement, and corruption will never survive the Vincentian electorate. You win all 15 seats in 89. And 9 years later, in 98, although you held on by a sliver to get 8-7, you lost the popular vote by 5,000, not 500. It wasn't close. It wasn't close. And so we could say, 12 years later, you were booted out by a 12-3 majority after winning all 15 seats. So me worry. The dynamics now are so different now that me worry about them with the 14-1. Now, Ralph Gonsalves and Labour comes into office in 2001, and we revolutionized the way the Parliament is done. What did we do? The government started having Parliament regularly, almost every month. And most importantly, the Parliament is broadcast live. Now you may ask me, you say, Sehon, but how does the Parliament deepen our democracy? Well, first of all, it's a part of our democratic system. You have 3 branches of government. You have the executive, which is the majority party in Parliament that runs the affairs of the country. You, and that's the group it is broadly and loosely called government. You say, oh, we form government, but it, strictly speaking, that's the executive. That's the group, the set that's managing the country and managing the economy, managing the affairs of the country. They're the majority party in the parliament. Then you have the minority party in parliament. So together, so you have the executive, this is one, that's they form cabinet, they managing things. That's the executive, so cabinet. Then the cabinet, which is the executive, and the opposition, the minority party, forms the second branch, which is the legislature, which is parliament. They pass the laws in the country. And of course, you have the third branch, which is the judiciary. All right. So immediately, the executive went about opening up the parliament, making sure that it is held regularly, that the legislative agenda is brought to the public so that bills are debated in the full view, the full air shot of Vincentians. They know what the bills are that are being debated. They know what's about. And they're hearing debate from both sides. They hear what the government is proposing. They're hearing what the opposition is opposing. So we know what's happening. Between 2001 and 2025, November, every piece of legislation that was passed, discussed, tabled in the House of Assembly was done with the full knowledge of the Vincentian public because they were able to follow along throughout, follow the entire process. Now, things like the referendum bill, for example, when the government wants to borrow money for the airport, for example, the education revolution motion, for example, all of which the opposition then, NDP, voted against. The motion on the education revolution raised by Rochelle Fourth Senator, they voted against it. The constitution bill, the seconded the motion, vote against the bill. Money to get bill to get money for the airport, they vote against it. I mean, and we could go on and on at the number of times the then opposition, which is in government now, did not participate in the legislative process in a positive and patriotic way. They instead voted against progress. But more than that, why do you think Parliament is important? You know, one of the part of the Parliament I look forward to? The question time, where questions are tabled for both oral and written answers. The opposition is able to table questions to the government for answers. And my sneaky suspicion is that the government, the executive, the group of people led by Godwin Friday, is running from the questions of the opposition. And why do I say that? Well, the first set of questions tabled, the speaker rejected a number of them. When you have no answers, when you have no real proper answers for the questions that are going to be asked of you on behalf of the people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, what is your next option? Hide. And how do you hide? By not convening the parliament. By not convening sittings of the House of Assembly, where the people's business can be discussed. Because it's not just the bills, and it's not just legislation, but it's questions for oral answers. And you used to hear them. You remember the days of the NDP? 20-something questions. 18 questions. Questions with part A, B, C, D, E, F, G, element of PQ. They asked and they got answers. Because that is how the business of the people is brought to the attention of the people. So, for example, Friday's Sun. What is his role in the government? How is he getting paid? That's a question for oral answer. The docket was an important question because Friday sun flying up on me and Friday all over the place. Every time you see Friday, you see sun. Has he taken an oath of secrecy? What exactly is his role? Is he being paid? If he's not paid by the government, who's paying him? These are questions the people of the country wants to know. So there are many issues in the country that would come out during question time, and the NDP afraid question time like Jumbie afraid holy water because they can't provide the answers in an honest, truthful way to the public, to the population. And that's what they're running from. And so the only way you can hide from the question time, from the questions for oral and written answers that are going to be posed from a very strong and proactive opposition is by hiding. And how do you hide? By not convening parliament. That is how they are threatening our democracy and our democratic process bit by bit by bit. Look, almost everything the government did that required, well, everything the government did required legislation previously. Legislation. So the Zero Hunger Trust Fund I spoke about, that was done through legislation. The SRNO that deals with COVID, legislation. And that is why the case is a difficult one for them because the crux of the COVID case, is that the process followed was unconstitutional. It has nothing to do, and I keep saying this, I said it many, many times. The crux of the COVID matter has nothing to do with my body, my choice, It has to do with whether or not the correct procedure was followed in arriving at the COVID regulation. That's it. But that was taken through its legal process and followed. That's one part of it. So when you hear Leacock, for example, talking about giving arrest powers to cadets, in other words, cadets could lock up people. For that to happen, it requires legislation. You can't just tell a cadet, go and lock up somebody. Of course, that would then give me work as a lawyer. If a cadet meets somebody and try to arrest them and fighting break out, person come to me and say, boy, somebody tried to lock me up and we scuffle up and so on. I'll take the work. Because unless it is put on a firm legislative footing, it's null and void. It can't happen. But how are you going to do that if you're not convening the House of Assembly, if you're not convening Parliament, if you're not ensuring that the legislative body meets to pass legislation to effect that? Camilo Gonzalez, former finance minister, came out and made the point that even the VAT-free day was illegally done because there's nothing in the legislation that allows for it. In America, they'd sue the government for that. They rushed to do something to get some political mileage. Didn't do it properly. You hear them talking about different things, and a lot of the things that they talk about require legislation. And legislation can only be passed through the Parliament. And we have an opposition. So you can't lock them out. You have to convene the Parliament so that the bills can be brought to the floor of the Parliament and debated and passed. That's the process that we have. But I think that's what they're afraid. So since you had budget, so you had the estimates, and PM went in. Sorry, PM, the opposition leader, former Prime Minister Gonzalez, went in and really flexed his muscles during the estimates. And then in the budget, those three individuals, the leader of the opposition, Ralph Gonzalez, Senators Kisal Peters and Carlos James, went in there and more than held their own. They showed up an incompetent, unprepared government side in the debate because they clearly they did not even debate their own budget. They didn't even debate their own budget. So already they realized, listen, these guys are going to hold us to the fire. These guys are going to hold our feet to the fire. We ain't getting away from that. We got to be prepared. And from the very first time, we see the questions that they bring. Boy, them is the questions that we prefer. Them is the kind of questions we can expect. Are those the questions that we can expect over the next 5 years? Mother work, we gotta hide. We can't expose ourselves to those type of questions. And so how do you hide? You hide by preventing, and they're the only ones who could call it, preventing the sittings of the House of Assembly. They're afraid the questions. They're afraid that the questions will expose their incompetence. They are afraid the questions will expose their mismanagement. They are afraid that the questions will expose their corruption. Now, April start, and I'm looking forward to see whether or not there will be a sitting of the Parliament in April. Remember, I think budget was the end of January, early February. So that's budget. No Parliament in February, no regular sitting of Parliament in February, no sitting of Parliament in March. Let's see what April has to offer. But I'm putting you, the viewers of this program, and Vincentians on a whole, I'm putting you on standby. I'm putting you on alert. I'm preparing you to be active, to be proactive. If we notice that the NDP, as they did during 1984 to 2001, if we notice that they are looking to limit, to threaten our democratic processes through the hijacking of the legislature with an intention to do their legislative work by cabinet, I put in y'all a notice. We are going to have to stand up and demand more from them. We are going to have to stand up and let them know, no. There are 3 branches, and each branch has its role and its function, and we want the legislature to function in the way it should. Don't forget, a key part of this, and I can't wait for it to happen, is the Public Accounts Committee. I can't wait. Because they call corruption. They have a chance now to expose the corruption. But we have a Public Accounts Committee chairman, the leader of the opposition, who I know is going to hold this government accountable. Bring it on. Bring it on. Call the Parliament. Let's continue what we were having for the past 24 plus years of regular sittings of Parliament every single month, where the issues relevant to our country's development are being discussed, where the relevant questions that concerns our country are put to the managers of our country, where the opposition can demand answers on behalf of our people. That is what we've accustomed to. That is how a functioning democracy works. With all the things that are going to change, we ain't going back to the days of no parliament. That's the change you vote for. We want to see continued openness and continued transparency with our legislative, executive, and judicial branches of government. We're going to hold you accountable. We're going to hold your feet to the fire. And like I said a few days ago on President Please, our opposition, I'm banking on them, and I'm expecting that opposition party with 3 members, 1 elected member and 2 senators, to do more than even the elected government will do. They have the capacity to do it, they have the experience to do it, and I know that is why I'm afraid to have parliament, because y'all know they go show all you up. This is where we come to the end of tonight's program, Uplift with Sehon Marshall. Let me thank you guys for joining. Let me apologize for the breaking transmission for about a minute or so, which was because of a loss of power. My laptop shut down, right? So yeah, I apologize for that. But other than that, let me thank you so much for being a part of tonight's program. Let me thank you so much for sharing tonight's program. And let me wish you a fantastic night as I bid you farewell. Until the next time, next Thursday, when I'm back with you, God's willing, let me wish you a happy Easter. If those of you who are people of faith, you go to church, you pray for our country, pray for our leaders, both government and opposition, pray for our people, pray for our youth, pray for our young men. Yes? For those of you who are people of faith. And for the rest of you, please play it safe over this Easter weekend. Until next week, God bless.